Okay. When she said it, it wasn't a question. I need the money tomorrow, my wife snapped, shoving a folder into my hands like it was a verdict already read. 370,000. No excuses. Her son's debt. Again. Bigger this time. Heavy enough that the paper bent at the corners from being carried around. Rehearsed. I didn't argue. That's what surprised her. She was braced for the familiar resistance. The sigh, the delayed negotiation, the quiet math I always did out loud. Instead, I just said, okay. It landed wrong. She narrowed her eyes, waiting for the follow-up, the conditions. There were none. Silence has a way of being mistaken for agreement when people are used to taking from it. That night, while she slept, I packed a small bag. Not clothes, really. Documents. Statements. Old emails. The kind of things you don't gather unless you've been counting for a long time. At the airport, the early flight crowd looked half awake and purpose-built for forgetting. I felt oddly light. Not free lighter. There's a difference. Free suggests joy. This was more like circulation returning to a limb you'd let fall asleep on purpose. On the plane, memories came in fragments, not scenes. The first loan I covered, just this once. The second, when I was thanked publicly and resented privately. The third, when it became assumed. I remembered the way my reliability had slowly been recast as obligation, then as character flaw when I hesitated. Too cautious, too controlling, too slow. The folder sat on my lap unopened. I knew what was inside. I'd been paying attention even when no one thought I was. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from a professional who spoke without emotion and charged by the hour. I slid the documents across the table. He didn't gasp. He didn't judge. He categorized. Not your legal responsibility, he said finally. But you've exposed yourself by acting like it was. We went through options. Not revenge. Not escape. Boundaries with teeth. The language of obligation rewritten into the language of liability. He explained consequences the way weather is explained. Neutral, unavoidable, precise. When I left, there was an envelope in my bag. Thin. Official. Heavy in a different way. Back home, I didn't go inside. I changed the locks remotely, something I'd put off for years because it felt dramatic. It wasn't. It was administrative. I placed the envelope in the mailbox, the way you leave instructions for someone who refuses to listen unless paper does the talking. I flew back out that afternoon. They came to the house just after sunset. I know this because my phone buzzed with alerts. Motion detected, doorbell pressed again. Then a pause long enough to suggest irritation, followed by the unmistakable body language of people who expect compliance and have just encountered delay. They tried the door. Locked. Someone spotted the envelope. It took less than a minute for the noise to start. Not shouting at first, confused questions, overlapping. Then a sharp rise in volume as comprehension set in. Authority has a sound when it enters a situation uninvited. It's not loud. It's clarifying. The envelope didn't threaten. It informed. It named agencies, timelines, and the precise consequences of attempting to collect money from someone who was no longer participating in the fiction that he owed it. It referenced filings already submitted. It invited communication through channels that didn't involve intimidation or my front porch. I wasn't there to see their faces, but I could imagine the moment they realized there would be no argument to win tonight. No one to lean on. My wife called me 3 times. I didn't answer. When she finally texted, it wasn't anger. It was disbelief. You embarrassed me. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know how to respond, but because I finally understood the exchange rate I'd been living under. My dignity had been the buffer between her and consequence. I didn't embarrass you, I wrote back. I stopped absorbing what isn't mine. That was the last thing I said that day. Weeks passed. The house stayed quiet in a way that felt temporary and permanent at the same time. Conversations, when they happened, were careful. There was no apology. There was also no demand. Power doesn't always announce itself when it shifts. Sometimes it just stops asking permission. I don't know what happens next. The marriage may not survive this. Trust, once recalculated, doesn't always inflate again. But something else has settled into place. A calm that isn't numbness, a restraint that isn't fear. For the first time in years, my money sleeps where I left it. My silence means what I choose it to mean. And okay is no longer a promise I can be forced to keep.